He'd built a life where even the coyotes avoided him. Miles of empty rangeland stretched in every direction, and that's exactly how Jake wanted it. No neighbors, no visitors, no voices calling his name. Until a dusty rider brought news that shattered his solitude forever. 3 orphaned children and a desperate woman needed him, and suddenly this broken cowboy would have to learn what it meant to be called Pa. If stories of unlikely families and second chances touch your heart, you'll want to stay until the end of this one. Subscribe to this channel for more incredible true stories. The last sound Jake Morrison expected to hear on his ranch was hoofbeats and someone shouting his name across the prairie wind. Jake! He gripped the fence post he'd been mending, splinters digging into his palm. Nobody rode out this far. Nobody even knew where to find him. That was the whole point. But the voice called again, closer now, and he saw the rider cresting the hill. A young man on a lathered horse, clutching something like it, burned his hands. Jake didn't move until the stranger dismounted, boots hitting the dry earth with a thud. "I've been riding 3 days from Millfield," the man panted. "Preacher told me to find you. Preacher told you wrong." The rider flinched but held out a folded letter anyway. "It's from Reverend Hayes. Said you were the only name left." Jake didn't want paper or people or the past clawing its way back, but something in the young man's trembling hands made him take it. The seal cracked. The ink was smudged from sweat or tears. "Sarah's gone. The children are alone. You're listed as next of kin." 4 names followed. 3 children and 1 woman who'd married his brother after Jake had disappeared into the rangeland 10 years ago. The letter fluttered to the ground. "How old?" Jake asked quietly. 11, 8, and 4. "And the woman, Emma, she married your brother 2 years back. Said you were all they had left." "My brother's dead too." The rider nodded. "Mine accident last spring." Jake turned toward the endless horizon, grass swaying like wheat in an ocean breeze. "I ain't seen him since the war." "I know, but the kids—" "I heard you." Neither man moved. Then Jake sighed, not loud, just tired. He jerked his chin toward the barn. "Water your horse. You'll ride back tomorrow morning. I got things to gather." Jake left at dawn with only what he needed: rope, hardtack, coffee, and the Colt .45 that hadn't been fired since Gettysburg. He reached Millfield by the second evening, his boots caked with dust and his back aching. The church sat crooked at the town's heart, its bell tower listing like a drunk cowboy. Reverend Hayes met him at the steps like he'd been waiting for years. "Jake Morrison. Reverend. Wasn't sure you'd come." "Neither was I." They walked to a narrow house behind the church, too small for the living, too quiet for children. "Emma's doing what she can," the Reverend said, "but the boy won't speak to strangers, the middle girl barely sleeps, and the little one cries for her mama every night." Jake's boots slowed at the door. "And my brother died in the mine." "Emma stayed for the children. She's not blood, but she stayed anyway." Jake stepped inside. The first thing he saw was the girl, dark-haired, thin as a whisper, standing by the stove with a wooden spoon too big for her hands. She looked up when he entered, eyes wide, but not afraid, just empty. Beside her sat a boy, maybe 11, jaw set like he'd already decided the world owed him nothing. A little one clung to his leg, thumb in her mouth, watching Jake like a hawk watches a snake. Then she appeared from the side room. Emma, taller than he'd expected, sturdy, not soft or fragile. She carried the weight of too many sleepless nights, but her eyes were steady. "You're Jake," she said. He nodded. "I am. Reverend said you're the only kin left." So he said. They studied each other. She saw a man carved by solitude and sun. He saw a woman holding everything together with sheer will. "They don't know you," she added. "Neither do you." "No, but Sarah always said you were the good one, even after you left." He winced. She saw it, but didn't apologize. "They need stability. I can't raise 3 alone, and I don't expect to keep my name on anything. But if you came for them, they'll need more than a roof." The littlest one toddled toward him then, tiny boots scuffing the floor. She tugged on his coat. "You look like my daddy," she whispered. Jake froze. The boy shot up, grabbing her hand. "Don't bother him, Lucy." But Jake knelt slowly, meeting the girl's eyes. "What's your name, little one?" "Lucy. And you?" He looked up at the boy. "I'm Ben," the child said stiffly. "And that's Grace." The middle child stared, but didn't speak. Emma cleared her throat. "They call me Ma now. You don't have to take me, but they can't be split up." Jake stood slowly, hat in hand. "You ride?" She nodded. "Then pack what's needed. We leave at sunrise." They rode out before the sun painted the sky pink. Lucy fell asleep in the saddle within an hour, curled against Emma's chest. Grace stayed silent, clutching a rag doll with no face. Ben kept close behind Jake, watching how a rancher moved, learning survival from every gesture. They camped under stars that first night. Wind whispered through the grass, but their fire stayed strong. Emma handed him a tin of beans. "You always live alone out there?" 8 years. "Why?" He shrugged. "War takes things from a man." She didn't ask more. Across the fire, Lucy murmured in her sleep. Ben sat whittling a stick. Grace stared at the flames like she could see ghosts dancing there. "You think this will work?" Emma asked quietly. Jake looked at them. 3 children who weren't his blood and a woman who had no claim to him, yet here they were. "No," he said, "but I'll try." Emma nodded. "That's more than most would give us." The next days were hard. Lucy cried every morning for Sarah. Grace refused to eat. Ben kept wandering off, trying to be useful with hands too small for the work. But slowly, something shifted. Grace followed Jake when he mended fences, watching without speaking. Lucy began humming again, clinging to his leg when thunder rolled, and Ben started asking questions. "How deep you dig a well?" "What do rattlers hate?" "How far can you see from the ridge?" Emma managed the house with quiet strength, never complaining. One morning, Jake found her crying behind the barn, wiping her eyes with her apron. She didn't know he saw. He didn't say anything. But that night, he left a carved wooden horse on her windowsill. She found it before sunrise and never spoke of it. But she smiled that morning. Then came the knocking. 3 sharp raps. Nobody knocked out here, not unless they meant trouble. Jake rose slowly, hand on the colt. Emma reached for Lucy. Grace shrank behind her. Ben grabbed the hatchet he'd been practicing with. Jake opened the door. A man stood there, dirty, grinning, eyes too bright. "Well, well," he drawled. "Didn't think you'd take them all, especially her." Emma gasped. Jake's jaw clenched. The past had found them. "You're not welcome here," Jake said quietly. The man laughed. Soft, scratchy, too casual for someone who'd ridden days through dust and heat. He looked at the colt resting easy in Jake's hand and clicked his tongue. "Name's Connor Walsh," he said. "Emma ever tell you about me? Or did she leave that part out when she sent word to the preacher?" Behind Jake, Emma stiffened. "Connor." The way she said it, like scraping a wound raw, told Jake everything. "See, she remembers." Connor tipped his hat mockingly. "Just came to check on the family, the one that used to be mine." "Goodbye," Jake said flatly. Connor raised his hands in mock innocence. "Easy now, cowboy. Just thought I'd say hello before I head south. Heard there's gold in them hills." He turned and walked away, slow and deliberate, spurs jingling like a death rattle. His coat flared once in the wind, then he vanished into the grassland. Jake didn't lower the colt for a long time. They didn't sleep that night. Ben stood watch by the door, hatchet in hand. Grace curled in Emma's lap, awake but silent. Lucy whimpered until exhaustion took her. "Who was he?" Ben asked around midnight. Emma didn't answer right away. She held Grace close and stared into the fire. "He was before your father, a mistake I thought I'd left behind." "Was he your husband?" "He thought he was." Ben didn't ask more, but his jaw clenched just like Jake's. By morning, Connor's tracks were already filling with blowing dust, as if the prairie wanted to erase him. "He won't come back," Emma said, though doubt shadowed her voice. Jake said nothing. "He's a coward, always was. Cowards come back when they think you've dropped your guard." Emma swallowed hard. "Then we won't." The days that followed were quieter, but not calmer. Ben pushed himself harder, working until his hands blistered. Grace began having nightmares. Lucy grew clingy, refusing to leave Emma's side. Jake worked the land, repaired the windmill, mended the corral. Every night he checked the rifle, and every morning he scanned the horizon. One afternoon, Ben followed him to check the cattle. "You ever scared?" the boy asked finally. Jake paused at the fence. "Of what?" "Of him coming back." Jake considered, then nodded. "All the time." "What do you do?" "Keep watch, keep working." Ben frowned. "That's it?" Jake glanced over. "You want me to say something pretty? I don't have that, just truth. You get scared, you work through it." "Did you ever have kids?" "No." "Why'd you come for us then?" Jake looked out over the grassland, endless and golden. "Because someone had to." Ben nodded slowly. "I'm glad it was you." A week passed. The grass grew greener. Wildflowers bloomed near the creek. Grace smiled for the first time when Jake carved her a wooden bird. Lucy stopped crying every night and started helping Emma with supper. Ben chopped his first full stack of wood and beamed when Jake nodded approval. It was working, slow, hard, aching, but working. Then came the fire. It started in the barn, no lightning, no lantern, just flames, sudden and hungry. Jake woke to smoke and the sound of horses screaming. He burst outside with a bucket before the others stirred. But it was too late. The barn was an inferno, hay crackling, heat lashing out like a wild beast. Emma came running, grabbing Lucy and Grace. Ben stood frozen. "Get the buckets from the well now," Jake shouted. Even with water, even with dirt, the barn couldn't be saved. They got the animals out, all but one milk cow. By dawn, the barn was ash. Emma sat in the dirt, hair streaked with soot, holding Lucy tight. Grace stood silent, face smeared with smoke. Ben punched the fence until his knuckles bled. Jake stared at the charred ground, jaw tight. This wasn't an accident. He knew it like he knew the feel of prairie wind, like he knew the weight of a loaded gun. Connor had come back, and next time he wouldn't stop at the barn. They buried the cow behind the house. Lucy cried until she hiccuped. Emma held her while Ben dug. Grace placed wildflowers at the mound. By nightfall, Jake had reinforced the door, set traps beyond the fence, and carved warnings into fence posts. Emma found him cleaning the rifle. "Are we safe?" He looked up. "No." "Then what do we do?" He checked the chamber, loaded 6 bullets. "We prepare." That night, Ben didn't sleep. He sat by the window, sharpening his blade. Grace curled by the fire, wooden bird in hand. Lucy whispered prayers with her eyes shut tight. Emma sat beside Jake, voice low. "I don't know how to make them feel safe again." "You don't," he replied. "You just stay. That's what they need." "And you?" "I've been waiting to fight for something that mattered." She looked at him then, long and quiet. "You're not alone anymore." Jake nodded. "I know." The storm was coming. But this time they wouldn't run. They'd built something worth keeping, and Jake Morrison wasn't about to let it burn. 3 days after the fire, Connor returned, not alone this time, but with 2 other men, faces hard as winter ground. They came at midnight when the moon was dark. Jake heard them first, hoofbeats like thunder across the prairie. He was already dressed, rifle in hand. Emma joined him, her own weapon across her back. She kissed Lucy's head where she slept, brushed Grace's cheek, and whispered something in Ben's ear before the boy stood and reached for his hatchet. The knock came. Not 1 man. 3. Bang, bang, bang. Jake cracked the shutter, saw them, Connor at the front, 2 others flanking him like wolves. "Morrison!" Connor's voice was cheerful, like he'd come borrowing sugar. "Thought I'd stop by for a visit. Still got that pretty widow with you?" Ben's fists clenched. Jake raised the rifle. "Step 1 foot closer and I'll drop you where you stand." Connor laughed. "Now don't be like that. I brought gifts." One of his men lifted something, a sack, then dumped it, a calf hide, blood still fresh. Grace gasped. "That yours?" Connor sneered. "Thought I'd make it real clear how this ends." Jake fired. One shot, clean. The man holding the hide dropped, clutching his shoulder, screaming. Connor didn't laugh this time. "Next one's through your heart," Jake said, voice low as graveyard dirt. Emma stepped outside then, rifle aimed. "You've had your fun. Now go." "You think I'm afraid of some woman with a borrowed gun?" She cocked it. "You should be." For a moment, the night held its breath. Then Connor spat in the dust, grabbed his wounded man, and backed away. "This ain't over," he growled. "You can't hide out here forever, Morrison." Jake stepped forward. "I ain't hiding." Emma stood beside him, Ben behind them, Grace watching from the window. Lucy, sleepy but aware, whispered from behind the door, "Pa's not scared." The men vanished into the darkness, but they left behind blood, smoke, and a silence heavy with unfinished war. Jake didn't go back to bed. He sat by the door, rifle across his knees, and watched the sun crawl up over the grassland. He wasn't afraid anymore. By morning, the ground was scarred with more than hoof prints. Blood darkened the dust near the corral. The trail Connor's wounded man had left twisted off through the grass, dragged and messy. Jake didn't follow it, not yet. He stood in the doorway, staring at that trail like it was a rattler coiled to strike. Inside, Emma moved quietly, checking on the children. Lucy slept again, curled under the quilt Jake's mother had sewn. Grace was awake, sitting upright with her wooden bird gripped like a weapon. Ben had kept watch all night, never closing his eyes. When Jake passed him, the boy whispered, "If they come back, we don't wait." Jake didn't correct him. There was no child left in that voice. Emma joined him by the stove. "They won't stop." "I know where he goes when he's licking his wounds," Jake said. "Old line shack near Broken Creek, only shelter for miles. You want to ride out alone? Number, I want him gone, but I don't aim to die doing it, and I won't leave you here." She studied him. "You mean to take Ben?" The boy had heard every word, already lacing his boots. "If he wants to come," Jake said. Emma stepped forward, cupped Jake's jaw with both hands. "If you die out there, I won't." She searched his eyes like a map before battle, then kissed his cheek and began packing bullets, jerky, and strong coffee. Ben joined her, wordless, tightening his boots. Grace walked over, silent as always, and handed Jake a folded drawing. It showed the ranch house still standing, smoke from the chimney, 3 figures on the porch, and in the sky, a sun breaking through storm clouds. Jake tucked it into his shirt pocket without a word. They left before noon. Jake on the bay gelding, Ben on the paint behind him, bundled tight against the wind. Emma stood at the corral with her rifle, barrel pointed down, but ready. Grace and Lucy flanked her, hands clasped. "You come back," Emma called. Jake didn't turn. "I will." Ben looked back once. Lucy lifted her hand in a small wave. The ride south was different this time. Not cautious, calculated. Jake led with the certainty of a man who'd memorized every creek, every ridge. The land he'd loved as sanctuary, he now read as strategy. They stopped once to water the horses. Ben sat beside him, unwrapping hardtack. "You ever kill a man?" the boy asked suddenly. "Yes." "Was it hard?" "Yes." Ben nodded like that was the answer he'd expected. "Will it be hard this time?" Jake stared at the water for a long time. "It's always hard. If it's not, something's wrong with you." "But you'll still do it?" "Because it's harder to watch someone you love suffer when you could have stopped it." The boy said nothing after that, but he moved closer and didn't sleep when they camped. By the next day they reached the ridge overlooking the line shack. Smoke rose from the chimney. Jake lowered his field glasses. 3 of them, Connor and his wounded man, plus 1 more. Do we wait? Jake shook his head. Waiting lets doubt in. He handed Ben the rifle with the scope. Stay here. Perfect view of the front door and the side window. I shoot. You fire if they pull a gun, not before. Jake crouched low and circled wide, using sagebrush for cover. He moved like smoke, silent, patient. At the back window he listened. Voices inside, arguing about revenge, about taking the woman next. Jake's blood went cold. He waited until the voices paused, then moved fast. Boot met door. The entrance shattered inward. Gun up, finger ready. The first man turned, reaching for his belt. Jake shot him in the thigh. He crumpled, screaming. Connor spun from the table, pistol already drawn. You don't want to do that, Morrison. You killed my brother over a debt, threatened my family, tried to burn us out. Connor laughed. Your brother was weak, should have stayed out of my business. A shot rang out, not from inside, from the ridge. Connor stumbled, blood blooming on his shoulder. Jake didn't hesitate. One shot to the leg. Connor collapsed. Jake approached, boots deliberate. You just tried to murder a family in their sleep. Connor coughed, arrogance bleeding out with his blood. Jake aimed again, the bullet missing his head by inches. Start talking, or the next one ends it. I'll tell you everything, please. By sundown, it was done. Connor confessed to everything. The fire, the threats, the plan to burn them out and claim the land. They tied him and his men to fence posts with rope from the shack. Jake rode for Millfield while Ben stood guard. The sheriff took one look at Connor's confession and nodded grimly. I'll handle it from here. When Jake and Ben returned to the ranch, stars were scattered across the sky like scattered coins. The house glowed warm in the darkness. Emma stood on the porch, rifle against the post, lantern in hand. The girls came running. Lucy screamed his name. Grace threw her arms around his waist without a word. Emma kissed him full on the mouth, her hands trembling. I thought you wouldn't come back. I said I would. Ben stood beside them, eyes bright in the lamplight. Emma pulled him into a hug. The boy stiffened, then melted into it. You saved us, she whispered. No, Ben said, looking up at Jake. Pa did. And for the first time since before the war, Jake Morrison smiled. Spring came like a promise kept. Not loud or sudden, but gentle, the way this family needed. The grass turned green and tender. Wildflowers painted the prairie in colors Jake had forgotten existed. The creek ran clear and cold. Birds returned. So did laughter. The house, scarred by threats and fear, stood strong. Grace's drawings hung by the hearth. The rifle still sat by the door, but it gathered dust now. Connor and his men had been sentenced to hard labor in territorial prison. The sheriff had wired confirmation. They were gone for good. Macy was the first to call Jake Pa without hesitation. It happened on a morning when sunrise painted the sky gold and pink. She skipped into the kitchen barefoot, clutching a prairie rose. Pa, she said, beaming, this is for your shirt. He froze, then knelt slowly, taking the flower and tucking it into his pocket. You think it'll stay? She nodded proudly. It's strong like you. He touched her hair gently and let her run off humming. Emma had been watching from the doorway, smiling like she knew he'd been waiting for that moment longer than he'd admit. She sang while she worked now, planted herbs by the kitchen window, made new curtains with Grace, pale yellow ones that caught the morning light. The house softened under her care, not losing strength, but gaining warmth. One day, a letter arrived from the territorial courthouse. Jake read it twice, then handed it to Emma. You're listed as their legal guardian, she whispered. All three, permanently. Jake nodded. Paperwork caught up. Emma stepped forward, hand on his chest. You're really their father now. I always was. He looked toward the children playing in the yard. Ben had rigged a rope swing from the oak tree. Grace was laughing, rare and precious. Lucy waved from atop a fence post. You want to make it official? Emma asked quietly. All of it? Jake pulled out a simple gold ring, worn smooth by his mother's fingers. You sure? Emma's laugh was the first full one he'd heard from her. "Jake Morrison, I've lived through war, death, fire, and fools, I'm sure." He slipped the ring onto her finger. This time, it wasn't just a promise, it was a life. The wedding happened under the oak tree behind the house. Not many guests, just Reverend Hayes, the children, and a few neighbors who'd started settling nearby after hearing the threats were gone. Emma wore her Sunday dress, mended and pressed. Jake wore his old cavalry coat, brushed clean. Lucy scattered wildflowers instead of rose petals. Grace held her wooden bird and Emma's skirt. Ben stood by Jake's side like a deputy. When the Reverend said, "Husband and wife," Jake kissed Emma, not quickly, not for show, but deeply, like a man who'd earned the right. The children cheered. Lucy screamed, "That makes us a real family now." Jake scooped her into his arms. We always were. That evening, Jake stepped onto the porch alone for a moment. The prairie stretched endless beneath the stars. No shadows, no threats, just wind carrying the scent of grass and home. Emma joined him, leaning against the post. "You ever think we'd have this?" He shook his head. "Not once." She smiled. "I did." He turned to her. "You saw all this before it happened?" "No, I just hoped hard enough that it might." Inside, the children laughed. The stars held steady. Jake took a deep breath. "I was supposed to die alone." Emma reached for his hand. "God had better plans." He nodded, and this time the silence didn't ache. It sang.